episode of the Information Addicts podcast. My name is Cassidy. I'm an information addict, and this is my podcast where I explore information, ideas, and beliefs and try to do those things more responsibly. Over the last couple monologue videos that I've released, I've been exploring this idea of truth. Personal truth, ultimate truth. What are those things? How do they interact with the world? And how should we interact with them ourselves? And today I want to continue sort of exploring the idea of truth. And if you haven't noticed already, I have an incredible interest in the topic, but not only that, I have an incredible respect for this idea of pursuing ultimate truth and how we can do that better. And I think there's a lot of different fields that we can use to pursue ultimate truth, and there's importance to pursue what is ultimately true, whether that's science, history, or even sort of interpersonally when we're talking about how do we do that with our family and our community and operate in a way that's healthy for those things and identifying how to operate in truth within those systems. But I think for myself personally, my sort of obsession, if you will, or interest in the topic was very much grows from the seed of religion and sort of the religious questions and how we answer those. Now, today I'm going to talk about sort of this pursuit of religious questions from a religious perspective. One, because that's where I come from and what I understand. And two, I think there's a lot of importance in unpacking those things and understanding how, as religious people, we begin to engage in those questions, because I think there is a lot of interesting processes and complications that go within that system. So I grew up in a house that was a house of faith, specifically a faith in Jesus, sort of a non-denominational Protestant flavor of religion. And through my experience growing up, there was a belief of God being truth and a value in holding to him and finding that truth in the embodiment of Jesus. And I think for a long time, I knew that that was the foundation of what I believed, but I don't truly think I understood what that meant. And it wasn't until I started getting older and taking my life more seriously and these questions more seriously and learning what it means to participate honestly within a religious system that I started to gain an appreciation for this idea of truth and the pursuit of those things within religion myself. I think a lot of people had that experience of growing up, learning about God, understanding and hearing that it's true, and then coming to faith in a more serious way down the line and understanding what that means to embody and participate in something like that and feel the value of understanding and pursuing what's ultimately true with those questions. So for anyone who has a genuine faith in a religion, whatever it be, Islam, Mormonism, any sort of denomination of Christianity, there's a level in which I can appreciate and accept the sincerity of the belief of those systems and worldviews. I don't think most people are blindly accepting and adopting and participating in these worldviews if they don't have a personal identification of those things being true. Of course, there's outliers, but as a general rule, if someone's actively participating and proclaiming a religion, I have no reason to doubt their sincerity on the face of it. The problem I started seeing as I was thinking about the way that we participate in these religious systems is that although there is a lot of similarities between all of these different religions and sects and denominations, there are distinct differences that not only separate each of these different worldviews by beliefs and what they claim, but they also give different prescriptions of what it is to live out in the world and how to participate well within the environment we find ourselves in. And it wasn't just subjective claims of one type of worship being more suitable and tasteful to someone else versus another. While I'll admit that there are a lot of those within these different practices and different religions, but at the end of the day, a lot of these differences are grounded in discrepancies between objective claims, where these faiths are making judgment and authoritative claims on how the world is and how it exists for all people at all times. I think for myself, where things started to get a little bit scary is when I started getting to the place where I was willing to explore honestly that my assumptions might not be true about what I believed religiously. I think the more that I grew up, the more I started talking to people of all different faiths and all different backgrounds, and it slowly began to lead to a lot of questions. Now, I definitely think that there's a value and an importance in identifying what we individually believe about those claims, what we believe about religion, how we operate within that, and doing our best to align ourselves with the things that we can claim to be true and living that out the best we can. But when I started really evaluating my own beliefs and trying to explore and figure out what was ultimately true within this religious frame, I found some patterns with the way that religious people talked about finding truth in religion that I found a little bit concerning. The first of these being this sort of emphasis on experience to show us what is true. So there's a lot of people, when you ask them why they believe their religion is true, they'll credit it to some spiritual or religious experience or a feeling that verified what they believe to be true. And they look to the way that it's manifested in its life and what they've experienced within church bodies and outside of church bodies to get them to the place of what they believe now. And, that's sort of the primary reason that they believe in their faith system. And I think this sort of reasoning is not exclusive to one religion or denomination. I think there's a lot of people who will use that sort of reasoning to come to an explanation of why they believe what they believe. And in a lot of ways, it's very understandable. Participation in the religious and the spiritual is very experiential. There's a lot of feelings and sensations that are brought up when operating in these modes. So it's not surprising or even unreasonable for someone to credit those things to helping them understand why they personally believe something to be true. I think it's sometimes good to look to those things to help us understand the things that we are experiencing and give us a sense of truth in the things we're participating in. But I really think that where this sort of reasoning begins to have a bit of a downfall is when this type of knowing is not put in its proper place. I think there are times we can get caught in the emotional high of what it means to participate in religion or go to a service that curates an experience to get us to feel certain things, and we begin to let that overload our systems and stop letting us look at the whole outside of just our perceived experience. I think it's really hard when you believe you found something true not to want to get excited about that and share that and keep that in mind as to not forget the things you were wrong about before. And that's what most people feel when they find religion. And I think this is the thing that sort of leads us to letting the experience of what we've participated in religion be the primary foundation of what we know to be true. And I'm not arguing that you can't use experience to help you argue for the truth of religion. And I think it would be doing a disservice not to. However, I think if we're only looking at experience, it creates a bit of difficulty in exploring these religious questions within our own faith and outside of it. So when I was an evangelical, sort of towards the end of my claiming of that faith, I went on a mission trip where we went on college campuses and shared the gospel. And it wasn't that I didn't believe in what we were doing, but there was a part of me that was a little skeptical and uncertain about the way in which we were participating in it. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to go, because I wanted to test my assumptions and my hesitations by embracing it and trying to understand what I could learn from that experience and maybe resolve some of this tension that was within me. And I'm very grateful for what I learned and what I experienced and what it taught me about asking religious questions and engaging in conversations with people on that front. But when I was going through this process, I was talking with my team who I was with on this mission, and specifically sort of the partner that I was with on campus. And I kept asking these questions and trying to unpack the things that we were doing. And there was one example that I kept coming to that I think helped illustrate sort of why this hyper reliance on experience stops us from really being able to identify the differences in truth between religious questions. So we would go on campus and we would go in pairs and talk to people about what we believed about God and why we thought it was true, telling them the truth about God. And so I would always say, well, what if we ended up meeting 2 Mormon missionaries on the campus? We want to share the truth we have with them, and they want to share their truth with us. How do we figure out which set of beliefs is actually true? The truth claims between an evangelical Protestant and an LDS missionary are very different, not only in the subjective, but also the objective claims that they're making. And if we're only relying on experience, we're kind of at an impasse on how do we decide whose experience is more genuine than another. We're both out there taking the risk of sharing what we believe, and that act of going out and participating in the uncomfortable process of sharing what you believe and often getting rejected from people all over the map from hearing the truth that you think you found says something about the way that you believe, or at least I think that there's a certain level of motive that makes you think that there is something very sincere about the belief that they're putting out. But it's clear that our personal feelings are insufficient to really get down to the nitty-gritty of why these differences exist and whose idea of God or religion or the spiritual world is more accurate. And yes, they might both be false, but to me, whether you think it's incredibly improbable or not, there's at least a possibility that one of these could be true. And how do we engage in those things? As religious people, it's easier to look at those questions and engage in them. But when it starts to clash with the experience we've had, especially when we've had good experience with religion, it starts to make it difficult to look past the things that we personally believe. Bottom line, I believe there has to be something more than just our personal experience when it comes to exploring religious questions and being able to claim what is ultimately true. And I think it does us a service to acknowledge that as we continue to seek the honest answers about these big questions. You know, if we're trying to understand the difference and find an authentic faith, there has to be more than just my personal subjective experience. I think another common pitfall I've seen is an unhealthy reliance on authority to help define what we believe. For many people, what they believe religiously is defined by what they've been taught. Whether you were born in a family and religion was all you know, and you gave a level of trust within your parents to teach you what was true, or at the very least, teach what they believed to be true in the most earnest way that they could, or you have a pastor who speaks with authority about the things that, you know, the sacred scriptures say and how that should work in your life and what you should believe. And, you know, I think there's something within us that we look to the people we like and the people who inspire us, and it shapes what we believe and how we participate in those things. And I think sometimes that can lead us to adopting beliefs that we might not have the clearest understanding of why it's true. Now, by saying this, I don't mean that it's a bad thing to look to our authorities to get answers to some of these questions. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, in being able to look to the people who came before us or the people who have more understanding or teaching about these things and help us get clarity of all of the cloudiness that is religious understanding. But what I think we often forget about the people who we seek out to help us understand these questions is that they're just that, people. Humans are flawed and incredibly capable of believing the wrong things. And while I think most people who are engaging in these questions and sharing what they believe about religion are doing that with sincerity, there are also people out there who are participating in these things for their own gain. And that can often affect the reasons why they are standing for what they're standing for or choosing to believe what they believe. And if we're not willing to be discerning about who is speaking to us and putting these ideas into our mind or the content that we're consuming, it can create a lot of chaos in trying to navigate this world. I think it's really difficult too, because I think that there are times that even the most sincere humans end up creating hurt and pain and trauma that can leave a distaste for religion in people's mouths, or make it harder to pursue these things with authenticity. And so there has to be this balance of understanding the strengths and weaknesses of us as people and giving grace when we can in the pursuit of these things, while also being protective of your journey and how you are going through these questions. And I don't think there's an easy answer to all of this, especially when it comes to people who matter to us. So the last major theme that I noticed in the engagement of religious people with other people outside of their religious faith is sort of this vigor to defend the faith they already have. Religion and spirituality are often deeply connected to identity. People embody the things that the church or their practice teaches, and they see it play out in their lives, and it becomes woven into the person that they are. And when you see that play out in your life and you see all the good things that have come from your participation in the idea of God and religion, it can lead a lot of people to have this excitement and energy to defend and share the thing that has given them this good. And then sometimes I think there's another extreme when the questions start to come and cracks start to appear, there becomes a fear. And it can lead to this sort of zealous defense of the thing that gave you this good because you're afraid of losing it. I think for most religious people, when you're in a conversation with someone who believes something different than you can often fall into this pattern where you hope someone sees the truth that you see and comes to a right belief of those things. But there's often not a lot of self-evaluation and testing of your own assumptions to sort of really see if the things that you ultimately believe to be true are that ultimately true. Right before I started my own deconstruction, I had this realization that even though I had been talking with people from different belief systems and political parties and really engaging in beautiful, honest conversations about the things that we believed, I had never stopped to really consider whether I was wrong. I couldn't remember the last time I had done that. And to me, that was a big problem. So when I go back to this example of myself and the Mormon missionaries, and we're sitting across the table from each other, and we're both trying to share what we personally believe to be ultimately true, why should I expect those Mormons to change their mind if I'm unwilling to have my mind changed? And why am I so confident that my belief is true if I don't really know what they believe? Now, again, I want to restate, just to be clear, It's not that I think any of these things in and of themselves are bad. I don't think that they're negative or unhealthy. I think they can be if taken in the wrong place. But at the end of the day, all of these are important factors in the way that we can pursue ultimate truth within the sphere of religion and get to the core of our religious questions. I guess my point in this video is just to say I think there's a little bit more intentionality and responsibility on the part of people who believe in the religious and the spiritual as we try to understand belief and explore or defend the things that we personally believe to be true, and work together in an attempt to try to find the things that are ultimately true, which I think we all are trying to do. So in my next couple of videos, I'm going to keep exploring this idea of truth and how we can explore that within religion. And not just only in my monologue videos, but also in my conversations. I'm really excited to be tackling this and trying to unpack it and understand how people are going through this journey of trying to identify what is true in religion and rethinking their own beliefs or learning how to dig deeper, and how we can work together to be better at this process of trying to answer these questions and engage with people who not only think differently than us, but also with those who think similarly. Because I think sometimes that's harder to really manage than people who think vastly different. I definitely think there's a better way we can go about having these conversations, and I'm excited to try. So with that, I will close with the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.